Alrighty then, everyone. Welcome to the stream. This is your boy, Sir Kappa, and welcome everybody to a new episode of the Millennial Kickback. Much appreciated to everybody involved, everybody who is here today. My name is Sir Kappa. I am the self-proclaimed demon of mischief, a little bit of a quirked up white boy goated with the swouse. And today I'm joined by a few guests. Actually, I'm joined by a much bigger crowd than I'm normally used to, so this is a new one for me. But before we actually get started on anything, I would like to take this opportunity to allow my guests here at this time to introduce themselves individually. So if you could, please introduce yourselves, starting from left to right. So Senna, that would be you.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Senna. I am a small, short-time rhythm and fighting game streamer. I also play a little bit of Monster Hunter. And when it comes to fighting games, I've been playing for about a year. So I'm starting to get a little more experienced, but it's nice to be here with everyone.
ISU would be next.
Howdy gamers, it is I, the Ice Cube. I'm Commander Ice, and I didn't really think through my intro too hard. I've been playing fighting games for quite a few years now. I've been part of the Smash Bros community initially. I played a lot of Street Fighter V for quite a bit, and then I got into Guilty Gear recently, and I've been I don't know, I think I'm like a mid-level player, I guess. I don't know. I haven't thought through my intro too hard, sorry.
Don't worry too much about it. But if that's up with the formalities for Ice, Inari, it's your turn.
Oh. Hi. I am Inari Yoko, Kitsune Fox Vtuber. Mostly I stream fighting games and the FPS games on my channel. And yes, regarding the Christmas hat, I'm in the Philippines right now. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. Other than that, I'm glad to be here.
Well, we gotta clarify that for the people at home, yes, it is indeed Christmas time, but not where we live. That's the very least we can say for everyone here, besides Inari. So, just
Christmas started in the Philippines like 8 days ago.
yeah. So do not mind the Christmas hat. My man is just straight bawling. That's balling. That's it. We're all dying in the heat. My man is bawling in the snow. Let's just leave it at that.
He's snowballing, dare I say.
Dare I say it? Yeah. And Roa, it is now. You now conclude the introductions.
Hello, my name is Roa Sato. I am a 09er that the FGC would call it. That's basically that started with like Street Fighter 4. That was when the renaissance of the new generation came. So I mainly play anime fighters. There's Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear. And I do compete and go to tournaments as well. Well,
we've got formalities done. Everybody's here. We know where everybody stands. So the main thing I brought you all together, I've talked about this off stream, and I want to enlighten everybody who is at home, so we can clarify a little bit of what the stream is going to be about, the podcast in question. We're going to be talking about the whole mentality aspect of the FGC, within the FGC, within its players, both newcomers and seasoned players. So I've brought you all here because all of you are vastly unique in the way that you've kind of experienced the FGC. Roa, you are the 09er, and Inari and Ice are the in-betweeners, and you, Senna, are like a mix between an in-betweener and a seasoned player. So I want to have a more like diverse way of thinking and like how each of us have kind of gone across our journeys with the FGC, but also kind of give an idea of what kind of things we could potentially help those who are within the FGC struggling like with their mentality of like do's and don'ts, and potentially talk about like topics that people feel about are currently happening within the FGC. One of the main topics I want to like start off though is I want to have everybody talk about the main controversy at hand, and that is the hitbox controversy that we're currently facing. And while you guys are talking about that, I will be away momentarily, but I will allow you guys the moment to speak.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whoever wishes to open that can of worms, I will allow you. I will be back momentarily. Something came up.
All right.
Okay.
I think we would like to start with probably
Who has a hitbox?
I believe the only one of us who owns a hitbox right now would be Kappa, but I think like both me and Roa have both been looking into getting a hitbox recently.
yeah, with me, I started using pad back in Blaze Blue's CT.
Calamity Trigger.
Calamity Trigger.
Yeah.
Back in Calamity Trigger, I switched it up. I switched to stick when Chrono Phantasma came out because of new stance mechanic. I had to change it. It was easier on me. But after a while of using a stick, I having pains in my wrists now from playing on stick for so many years. After that, and playing on the pad, it also dealt with that as well.
Yeah.
So to compensate, so to help me do the longevity of my FGC career, I'm going to go switch to a hitbox.
Yeah, sounds good. Honestly, for me,
I
have a similar progression. Kind of starting with pad at first and then switching to a stick after a while because it hurt a lot. But for me, I am kind of hesitating on hitbox mainly because all button is still kind of rough on my hands after being a rhythm game player for so long, my hands are both kind of really messed up. So stick has been less painful for me compared to having all button in a hitbox or mixbox layout so far. Ice and Yoko, either of you have any opinions on hitbox as it is right now?
Hey, you can go ahead.
All right. I don't plan personally on swapping over to hitbox remotely because I'm more comfortable on my stick as is, and I don't know. It's not that I don't feel like I'll be able to like make a full transition over, heaven forbid. It's just that I don't think that I'm at a point where my game will level up at all because of using a hitbox or anything. I don't think it'll make any tangible difference using a hitbox versus using a stick right now. And I'm still like, my hands are fine, my wrists are fine. I have beefy forearms. Yeah, I understand the discourse where it's like, I can empathize with it because it's a very different sort of like, oh, things are changing. And I understand that people might not be a fan of that, but it does benefit people that are like, you know, have bad wrist problems and need potential help and support. And yeah, I think it's a net positive for hitbox, and I think it deserves the space to flourish. I don't think it should be demonized even. I don't quite know how else to really go other than that. I'm just kind of
I think
like,
that's pretty good right there.
So
Yeah.
I just got back. Sorry, I was just listening in, and I didn't want to like butt in anything. And also appreciate it for the people that are in chat who rated. I currently don't have that on. I currently don't have the notification for any of that on. So if anybody who's using the redeems, none of those will pop up. Not even raid messages, none of that shit. So I do apologize. We're not ignoring you. We're just focusing on this. But from what but could you run me up to speed so I can know what we talked about real quick? Sorry for being a bad host about that.
Yeah, no problem. We are just going through our experience with hitbox or our thoughts on getting one at the moment. Ro and I said that we are both considering getting one for basically the same reason of preserving our hands for our hopefully long time career in the FGC and being able to play longer without the hand pain, with my only hesitation being that my hands are already kind of bad from playing rhythm games, so hitbox may not work out for me because of that.
Yeah, as someone who's been playing on a hitbox for like the latter half of a year now, and probably a little bit even longer as well, like I'd say almost a year and a half now, almost 2 years now, if you push this all the way to April. So the way I see it, and the reason why I even decided to get a hitbox myself, is the fact that I understand like the people's gripes with it, but one of the main things that I got when I got that hitbox is the fact that I needed a controller that would help me with execution, because I was a long time pad player and I've been around the FGC since 2015. I was used to playing on an Xbox pad, and y'all know how bulky them bitches are. They're plus size. Like my hands are like operating on that. I can't play on slim controllers like the PlayStation controllers, especially not DualShock 4. And like the DualShock 2 and the DualShock 3 were okay, but I think the DualShock 2 was like something I can manage. But I mostly played on a bulky controller like the Xbox One controller, the Xbox One S. And the one major thing that I found out after I got that hitbox it doesn't innately mean that you're going to have the skill necessary to play at a relatively good level. I will say though, it has enabled me to be able to pull off things that I normally execution wise would not be able to do otherwise on a pad, because I did not have the muscle coordination to be able to execute them, and I didn't have the liberty and the freedom to play on a pad as I do on a hitbox. There's so much more freedom that you can do, especially because it's like, unlike with a pad, you have more freedom of hand movement and hand-to-eye coordination, where you can shift your hands and use both hands, opposing thumbs, to be able to operate one set of movement options and then use the other hand to use the rest, and then use that same hand that you have on the other side for the face buttons to input as well. There's more freedom and more elasticity that you can manage with that. On a pad, you don't have that same elasticity, because you have to play on claw, which is very small, very uncomfortable, and depending on your hand size, it doesn't feel right. So
Yeah.
and for
Not
stick
just doesn't
players,
feel right, but it can hurt too.
yeah, and for stick players, I've heard this argument as well. That's why I considered stick, but I heard these ongoing things of like Goichi when he played the sets in Evo 2019, and I've heard other people's like horror stories of how people played on the on stick for years, and they developed wrist problems, and it fucked up their hands, their arms. It was just really bad, and I heard about that. I didn't want that to happen to me, so I decided if I'm gonna stick with anything, and I saw ProxyCon talk about this, I went for a hitbox. Granted, there are some things on the hitbox that are a little bit tougher to do. Like for instance, perfect half circles are a bit tougher. You have to use some sort of input techniques that allow you to get them more consistently. There are certain techniques that you have to do in order to be able to manage other stuff, like inputs like pretzel motions. You have to get used to the idea of being able to do like half circle back forward. Half circles are already weird, but trying to do them on a hitbox is a little weirder, because some games do not let you cheat the input. You have to do it perfectly, like in Blaze Blue Central Fiction. Yeah, and you know, that's why I got it. And I will say my execution has not been better since. And it took me a month or about a few weeks of consistent usage, but after a while I started to pick up habits and shortcuts and ways of like trying to figure out how to do it. And I think that there's nothing wrong with having accessibility in the terms of a controller. I think if the controller itself functions well with the systems in place, like SOCD cleaning, if the game itself and the controller manufacturers operate under the same rules of being able to make it so that your controller doesn't innately give you an advantage across the board over other ones, especially like towards pad players as well. I think if you give everyone the same playing field or a similar playing field, then I think that playing on a hitbox, a cross-up, a stick, or a pad, it doesn't matter what controller you should be playing on or what controller you should tell people have to play on to get wins. I think anyone can play on anything, but you know that we don't live in a utopian society like that. Some people are going to find reason to complain.
Yeah, as we've been seeing recently with the light of the current hitbox, I guess I'll call it a controversy, even though it kind of isn't. For those who are unaware, the original creators of the hitbox, or what we now call the all button layout, to avoid getting mixed up with their brand, they released a video of them inputting a super in Street Fighter V in 4 frames, which is 1/15 of a second. And a lot of people have been calling the hitbox a cheating device for the few years that it's existed, due to these kinds of things, being able to input things quicker than everyone else is able to. And in the case of this 4-frame input on a super, that has been viewed by a lot of players as an unreal level of cheating, because it is just physically impossible to do on many of the current standard controllers. So a lot of people have been calling for it to truly actually be banned, and there's been a lot of pushback against it due to that recently that's been picking up. Because a 15th of a second is extremely quick in fighting games. I believe for pad players, you could probably do it in like 10 or 11 frames, but for stick players who make up a very large portion of the community, I think it was difficult to do even in like 17, which is like more than 3 times as much time. So I can understand why people were like upset to see it, and why people think that the hitbox does give a genuine advantage once you've gotten used to it. But I will say, I think the advantage is kind of an oversight. I'm not going to say it's an oversight on controller manufacturers. I think it is more of an oversight on game development side, in which you're allowed to do things that allow you to input at that speed.
Shocking claim, yes, it is about 4 frames. 1/15 of a second is about 4 frames. Or somewhere about. That is relatively fast. To put it into perspective, the time it would take for you to do a quarter circle on a controller would take relatively less time on a hitbox, and I can speak on that on behalf of everyone in this chat. I've played for about a year now. I've already mentioned I played about a year and a half, so I can tell you right now that there is some level of advantage, but I do not think that the advantage itself is enough to warrant a ban, nor do I think it warrants the need to like put it on the scale of a cheat box. Shit, I'm drinking Coke, sorry. It's one of those things where if it's possible to play with and it's awesome, and it makes execution a little bit easier, especially for more technical inputs like Tiger knees, especially because there's like the traditional method, and then there's the and then you have the shortcut method where you hold up and then the input that you need to TK with. But that's another discussion for another day. But speaking on the topic of accessibility, though, like continuing off of that, I actually want to bring up something that's been a topic of, and it's been a center of controversy, but has also been like a positive thing. It depends on where you side with the spectrum, and I want to talk about the accessibility that happens within fighting games, and this can go one of 2 different ways. It can be seen as a negative thing or seen as a positive thing, and we've seen this in the fighting game. If you've been around, like any of you have seen it, the Japanese fighting game roundtable, they've had about like 3 to 4 now, and you've had like different developers from the JP fighting game scene, like Bandai, SNK, you've got Atlas, you got Arc System Works, you have, I think I already said Bandai, you've got multiple companies all coming together, which is a very huge deal if you don't understand. These people are so conservative and keep to themselves so frequently that it's hard to even get any change, but they came together and they're working on projects to like help make the scene better. And one of these things was accessibility, both on a by in a sense simplifying games a little bit more, and possibly adding systems in place that allow for more players to pick up the game and, you know, run their shit. And one of the biggest projects that did that was Guilty Gear Strive, another one being DNF Duel. And I wanted to extend this question to you guys of like, how do you feel, like, what do you feel about, how are your feelings on the idea of accessibility? Like, where do you think, how do you feel about the direction of it, more importantly?
I am all for it. How is the grassroots mentality of the FGC that's gatekeeping it? Because everyone's just used to controllers because they're playing on console or playing on stick. Where we started from the arcades. Because of that, it's very hard for us to grow and have accessibility with everyone. But even we complain about having auto combos as well. So,
oh man, I remember the auto combo.
I know.
Pain.
I think that controversy started with Persona 4 Arena.
Actually, that
Vanilla.
started sooner. I feel that started way back with like Melty Blood, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then
like
Ooh.
Acadenza, I believe it was like it was MVAC, or I think it was just Melty Blood Acadenza.
yeah.
Which iteration was that? Was that the first iteration of Melty, or
It was really, really early on. Like this is when they first dropped the Melty Blood fighting game.
I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. Yeah, so with that and like Persona also infueled that with like a one button DP as well.
Oh yeah, it
Yes,
has
with
that.
Blaze Blue cross tag battle, you were able to do that. I do actually remember that.
I mean, I still remember the DP input for Persona 4. It's literally just X plus circle, or for Tekken inputs, it's literally 3 plus 4.
Yeah, a 2-button input.
2-button input would
And-
cost 2 HP, but the
you can't macro it.
the HP drain could never like kill you.
Yeah, bro, bro, I just heard it right there. Like you could macro it. I know on BB Tag and you could, and BB Tag in general, you could macro that, and I know that in certain other games you also have this. Like you technically have this with like certain games. Even Exert, I think, had this with Jacko, where originally she doesn't have a sweep on her, like her 2D. It's actually like a physical one button DP if you held down, and then the her sweep was her down forward heavy slash. And you know, that actually brings up a good topic of like the whole accessibility thing, like the macros. And one of the biggest ones is like macros for dash macros. Like this is a big one for Strive. And
yes, this has been a point of contention with the release of Strive.
And people talk about this, like how would like we should have dash macros in these games or that game. And I feel like, in my opinion, like when you make these kinds of accessibility options, or you make games accessible and characters accessible, I've always held the opinion that like this took me a while too, because I had to play other games to like form this opinion myself, because I was against auto combos myself, because I came from Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and then I played a lot of like technical fighting games, even Skullgirls before then. Then it took me some time to open up to it, but like when it was on the topic of macros and like adding all these accessibility features and adding games with accessibility, my whole idea is that if you're gonna make a game around this and the characters around this, you have to balance around these concepts as well. So that could mean removing tools from characters, or you could change their tools properties. You could, instead of removing tools altogether, you reconstruct the way these tools are used, or you alternatively change their win condition, or a mixture of all four.
Yeah, and I think Strive has done so. I want to say BlazBlue, when they released Cross Tag Battle, they did something similar where a lot of characters were made a lot more linear in how they played, so that it was easier to understand as well. Because that was another big issue in terms of accessibility, was players not knowing what to do and not being able to get a feel for characters. So Strive and Cross Tag Battle did a lot of work in terms of making it easier to understand what moves could go into what and how you could approach situations. Like, one of the biggest issues that a lot of people complained about in a lot of older games, if they were first starting out, is how do I know what buttons I'm supposed to be pressing? Versus, like, because you have so many, like, if you go to Xrd, for example, you have your 5 attack buttons, you have your punch, kick, slash, heavy slash, and dust, which are the standard of Guilty Gear games.
But every character has like their own Gatling charts and everything.
Yeah, and it's not intuitive to play, and you're thinking, oh, this move is fast. Like, if I press 5P, this move is fast, and I can Gatling out of it. So why should I not always be pressing this button? But this move also does like no damage. And this led to a lot of complaint within like the starting community because they did not know where to start with like any sort of actual combo starting or any of that, and it was too fast to react for them to understand and learn a lot of things, which is where how we got the Guilty Gear Strive counter slowdown, where it lets you react to getting a counter hit so that you can start a proper combo. And a lot of people complain it makes the game feel too slow, but for me, who is coming in with Guilty Gear Strive being my first serious fighting game, I really appreciated that change because it let me know, oh, I've done this combo, I got the hit, so now I can take a second, recognize that I got the counter hit, not just based off of an audio cue, which not everyone is able to hear for one, because there are plenty of players who are hard of hearing or in some cases even deaf. I think that having that slowdown makes it a lot easier for them to recognize that they've gotten a counter hit as well. Because a lot of games, they have like audio cues that you can run off of, but those audio cues aren't accessible to everyone. And it might not have been like the initial focus of adding the slowdown, but it helps them as well. So I really never saw an issue with it. A lot of people complained about the dash macro in Guilty Gear Strive, but it's not the first fighting game to have a dash macro for the fun of it. I believe Under Night is a series that had a dash macro that you could bind. I think it did. Melty Blood has always had a dash macro from my understanding.
BB Tag has one as well. Dragon Ball Fighters has one.
Yeah, if you've played Arcana Heart, it has a homing dash, which will take you not just across the ground, but even into the air as well.
Yeah.
So
For
you use it
some-
in game for combos.
I remember some Oki setups actually you just tap that button for Oki.
Yeah, it's a game. It's quite the odd game. I would not recommend it to people because of the content of the game, but the fighting mechanics are pretty polished, I think, despite it feeling stiff to me as someone who's coming from Guilty Gear.
Yeah.
Movement feels really nice in Guilty Gear and in Blaze Blue. I think maybe one of the bigger issues people have had with some of these games is not liking how the game feels to move around in as well.
Well, on the topic of like accessibility, like before we tackle fighting games, like accessibility has been a thing that has been cropping up in video games in general, which is again always a good thing. Like in general, you always want more people to be able to play video games, regardless of what genre it is. But when it comes to fighting games, that's really when it starts to become quite the balancing act because, and again, this also ties in with the whole controversy of the hitbox. And just to give an example, I'm just gonna use Tekken's Electric Wind Godfist. And again, that game, in terms of like accessibility options, the only things it really has are shortcuts, and it doesn't even have a dash macro. But like the whole nature of a dash macro is that you're basically shortcutting a motion input into one button to save time or, of course, accessibility. But that makes a lot of things in the game a lot easier if they did add an input macro into it. And if the hitbox did not exist, but the shortcut did exist, that would be a problem because the Electric Wind Godfist is a just frame down forward 2 input. And if I could just shortcut down forward into one button, literally all I have to do is press 2 buttons at the same time instead of timing it perfectly. And if that sounds similar, that's exactly what the hitbox does. You can basically time multiple inputs at the same time. And because of how fighting games tend to register inputs from your controller, it's going to read them almost as a frame perfect input. And going back to the topic of accessibility, like recently, I would say one of the more controversial issues, even before the hitbox, was when Street Fighter 6 announced the modern and classic inputs. And already, when I saw that, two thoughts immediately. First was like, oh, cool. They're going with a lot easier inputs. And then the second was like, wait a minute. This is a problem for characters like Chun-Li and Guile that are charge characters. Could
Because how
you
do those
actually,
work?
could you actually just press one button and do a spinning bird kick or a flash kick?
And then sure enough, like we found out that there was some form of shortcut, but it wasn't like at first everyone's thoughts were like, oh shit, no, we're getting like the DS version of Street Fighter 4 again. Oh god, no, not this again. But then when we finally found out, like, and you know, this is why people jump to conclusions like really fast, because they didn't read the page. It showed like physical demonstrations as well as a way how you do it. They still have the shortcut, but you still have to do the charge input.
Oh, you do still have to do the charge input? That's nice.
Yeah,
I actually never looked into it, because when I saw the simple mode, when I saw like the modern controls, I was like, that's cool. It's nice that they're making it easier for people to understand at first. I'm not gonna use it, but it's cool that they have it as an option.
like I don't think you have to do like the full technical input of like down charge or down back into up, or
But you still
or
have
down
to like
forward and
hold back
forward.
or down.
You still have to hold the charge. That's the thing. Like they kept the charge mechanic. It's not like you can just like straight up do the thing like immediately. No, or you can walk forward and do it. No, you have to do the charge itself, if I remembered correctly.
Okay, that's good,
Yeah,
because
and I think they've
when they first
done a lot of
revealed
balancing around
that,
it.
when they first revealed that, all we really got for a couple of hours or a few days was just Ryu. That's all they showcased. They just showed a simple Tatsu, a simple Shoryu, a simple meaty kick, and a simple Hadouken. We did not see any release of images or how it works on characters like Chun-Li and Guile. Like, we didn't see that for a while. That's why a lot of people were worried. Including
Right.
me, because I'm like, wait. Yeah, I get Ryu. I can see someone like Juri and Luke. Yeah, I get that. But how about characters like Chun-Li and Guile? These are charged characters. They don't work the exact same way.
More concerningly, how would you make that function with characters who basically can use anti-zoning tools, who can low profile, or who could physically kind of have them like a more complex game? For instance, like how do you take Minot, for instance, and play them if they ever bring a Minot? Is my question. Like, how do you take that character like Minot and potentially add them into a game like Street Fighter 6? Or more importantly, like what would be another like high level character, like a high tech, like Ibuki? Well, she became a resource management character for that game for Street Fighter 5 when originally she didn't really have the resource. Then you had characters like, say for instance, like you just randomly bring Oro back but with drip this time. Like, how do you bring a character like Oro, who is like universally agreed to be one of the most technically difficult characters to play, not the toughest, but like up there with like a very high execution floor, and like to optimize him, it takes a lot of optimization and a lot of technical adversity to be able to like put him into the greatest of use. How would you put a character like Oro, like theoretically speaking, into Street Fighter 6? And that's something that a lot of people were concerned about. And you know, I'll double check it in a minute, but while you guys are talking about this, but it definitely begs the question. It's like, how do you know whether or not accessibility is a good thing or a bad thing? And I just say that accessibility does not equal simplifying everything, and simplifying doesn't inherently mean making easy to use. You know what I mean? I have kind of come to the agreement, even Arc System themselves, to talk about this, where the concerns of like simplification and accessibility like deteriorating the integrity of fighting games. And you know, while I do agree in some aspects, because I don't want it to literally guide your hand like, oh yeah, little Timmy, I've got you. Like, don't worry about that, like, technical input